All right, welcome back. This is the second part of lecture 13. It's a continuation. We just got done talking about the spinal cord, gray matter, white matter, the organization of the spinal cord, and we began to look at how the axons come off of the spinal cord and form those peripheral nerves. So we are going to start this lecture by talking about those spinal nerves that are coming off of the spinal cord. And I'm making this lecture because a lot of what we do in lab is to begin to identify some of these nerves that are located along the spinal cord. So you need a little bit of an introduction as to what these nerves are and how to find them. So I told you that all along the segment of the vertebral column, you have paired nerves coming off on the right and left of the vertebral column, okay? But there are areas on the spinal cord where we have networks of nerves, okay? So all of the spinal nerves, except for the nerves in the thoracic region, form something called nerve networks, which are called plexuses. All right, these plexuses are found, there are 4 areas that I want you to know. There's something called a cervical plexus, a brachial plexus, lumbar, and sacral plexuses. And again, these are interlacing nerve networks that you're going to find in these regions, and I'll show you a picture. So within the plexus, there are fibers or axons that are crisscrossing over each other, so that each branch contains fibers from several different spinal nerves. And I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. So that each limb muscle is innervated by more than one spinal nerve. So this does create some redundancy. But you will see on models that we have in the lab, you'll be able to make out these plexuses and what I'm talking about. So this picture highlights those 4 plexuses that I mentioned, the cervical plexus. So you can see how they come off of the spinal cord like this, but then they form this plexus here. So again, they're interlacing. The nerves are crossing over each other. And so the cervical plexus, that's in the cervical region. There's a brachial plexus, a lumbar plexus, and a sacral plexus. And I want to tell you about some of the important nerves that are found within each of these plexuses. So you can see here in comparison that the thoracic nerves, they don't form that plexus. They're just a single nerve coming off of the spinal cord. Whereas in these other areas, you have more complex patterns here, okay? So you can see them there. So, and again, this is not something I want you to memorize. I just want you to get an idea of what a plexus is and what I'm talking about. So any given nerve, and we'll talk about some of these nerves. These are nerves that are located in the arm. Sorry, I was about to violently cough in the recording as I'm drinking my soda. So you see some of these nerves. These are nerves that are found in the arm. If you want to trace, let's say, so there's a medial nerve and an ulnar nerve. They have multiple paths to get back to the spinal cord. That's what this plexus is. So the path could go, up this way to C6. The same nerve can travel a different path. So there's redundancy in the system for those nerves. And this is also helpful if you get damage, if you're in an accident or something and you damage a nerve. There are multiple ways to get back, to send back information to the spinal cord. So this is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about a plexus. This is what those areas look like. They're crisscrossing The fibers are crisscrossing each other and creating these very complicated networks. Okay, that's the take-home message here. I just want you to be able to see what we're looking at. And again, this is another thing that I'm just trying to give you an overview so that you understand it when we start looking at it. So I definitely don't want you to memorize something like this, but just to understand that the plexuses in a particular area are going to serve the organs or the skin or the muscles that are in the area. So the cervical plexus, for example, is going to, those nerves that come out of that plexus are serving the head, the neck, the shoulders, whether it be the muscle or the skin for sensation. The brachial plexus is going to service the arms, the shoulders, and the hands, and so forth. And the lumbar is going to serve some of the back and the calves. So just so you have an idea of how these plexuses are working and what they're servicing. This isn't something I would ask you, but you need to know some of the nerves that are being derived from these plexuses. And as I get into it in this next slide or two, I'm going to highlight those features that I want you to understand. All right, so for instance, on the cervical plexus, again, there's a lot of nerves that are coming off of this cervical plexus, okay? But I really just want you to know one of them, and it's a very important nerve. All right, and it is called the phrenic nerve, okay? And the phrenic nerve is important because it is a major motor and sensory nerve of the diaphragm. So if this nerve if you damage the phrenic nerve, then you would not be able to breathe because the diaphragm is essential for respiration. Okay, so this nerve is really important, and it is the only one I want you to know. I'm showing you this slide so you can get an appreciation of this cervical plexus, how complex it is, how many nerves are coming off of the plexus. But the idea is that I really just want you to know that the phrenic nerve is coming from the cervical plexus. So that's the only one. But there are a lot of other nerves that are innervating this region. I have a really good picture of the phrenic nerve and how it makes its way down to the diaphragm from the cervical region. So this image is showing you how the phrenic nerve, you can see it here in yellow, is leaving the cervical plexus. It runs down the side of the heart, and then it innervates this diaphragm right here. Again, this nerve is absolutely critical for allowing us to breathe. So if we damage this nerve, we're in a lot of trouble. All right, so phrenic nerve, cervical plexus. The brachial plexus, there are several nerves here, and we have a model that'll show some of the nerves. So again, you can see the complexity that is happening with the brachial plexus. There are a lot of nerves that are coming off of this plexus. We have some arm models in the lab that will show some of these nerves. So I kind of circled the majority of the nerves that I thought might be able to be found in the lab. All I need you to do is be able to tell me to name a nerve from the brachial plexus. Why don't we say two nerves? So there is the radial nerve that comes out of this plexus, the ulnar nerve. There's a nerve called the median nerve that runs right in the middle. I have a picture that shows you this. The axillary nerve is going to run under the armpit area and around our shoulder, and same with the musculocutaneous nerve, okay? So in this situation, be able to name two of the nerves in this plexus for the written exam. For the practical, I'd probably want you to be able to identify either the radial, the ulna, the median, And I'm not sure which one of these is on the arm model in our lab, so we'll discuss that. Just make sure to remind me. One of those is probably on the arm muscle. So you would need to be able to identify those nerves. All right, we are going to skip this slide. I thought I took it out, but I didn't. It's too much information. All right, here is a nice picture showing you some of those nerves that are coming off of that brachial plexus. All right, so you can see the ulnar nerve. It's going to run down the same side as the ulna, the bone. Here's the radial nerve. The median nerve runs right in the middle. Here's the musculocutaneous nerve, and here's the axillary nerve. So again, they are the muscle. I'm writing this down so you guys remember too. Muscle arm model has some of the nerves. And that is what I would use for the practical. So make sure that you can identify some of the nerves depending on what is available on those models. Also, always keep in mind that these nerves are innervating either the skin or the muscle in that area. So all the sensations, all of that is going to be detected by these nerves or muscle movement. So these pictures are kind of fun because it shows you what nerve is innervating what parts of the skin. Again, not for you to memorize, but just that you can see, if you get a little itch on your pinky, that is the ulnar nerve that is going to detect that. If you have, a sensation on this side, that is the radial nerve. And what's also nice about this is that all of the nerves have been mapped. So if there's damage to the nerve, oftentimes a clinician will determine if you have lost sensation in a particular area, and that would determine what nerve might have been damaged. Okay, so that's one way to look at these. All right, let's move on to the lumbar plexus. There's only a couple nerves that I want you to know here. Again, this is innervating the lower limbs and the pelvis. The two major nerves that are coming out of this plexus are the femoral nerve and the obturator nerve. All right, so I know that the femoral nerve, this is a very large nerve that innervates a lot of the leg muscles. This you can easily find on the leg muscle model. Okay. And the obturator, I'm not 100% sure if you can even see that on any model. So it might only be the femoral nerve that you would need to know. And again, I just need you to be able to tell me that the femoral nerve comes from the lumbar plexus and be able to identify it on a model. All right, this again, more just FYI, we will have learned all of the muscles. So now you can see, we've already gone through most of these muscles, that the femoral nerve is the one that is innervating these muscles. And then the obturator nerve, we will have gone over some of these muscles, maybe not as many, but that is the nerve that is innervating that muscle. And it is also innervating the skin in that area. And then finally is the sacral plexus. And the most important nerve that comes from the sacral plexus is the sciatic nerve. This is the single largest nerve in the body. It covers the entire leg. And it actually splits into the tibial and common fibular nerves. So it's going to split here. And again, it's going to take on the name of that anatomical region. It's the same nerve, but sometimes as we move down through anatomical regions, it's going to take on the name of that region. Okay, so that's what those two nerves are. This is common, a nerve that gets injured. It can be damaged or compressed. You may have had friends who have had sciatica, and that is because that nerve is being compressed or is damaged in some way, and that then creates pain down the legs. All right, so I've kind of alluded to this as I was describing some of these peripheral nerves, but we can basically map all the areas of our skin using what's called a dermatome. And I have a picture of that on the next slide. So it's an area of skin innervated by a single spinal nerve, okay? And what it does is ultimately it's going to help physicians pinpoint the level of spinal injury. So let me show you what that looks like. This is just interesting information. So again, this is a map. This is the anterior side of the posterior side. And each of the regions of our entire body has been mapped so that we know exactly which nerves are innervating these areas. And this would allow us to determine if you did have a spinal cord injury, what part of the spinal cord was injured. I want to finish this lecture by showing you 2 slides of the autonomic nervous system. And that's all I need you to know about the autonomic nervous system. This is a complex system that you will hear a lot about in physiology, but there's really not a lot of anatomy that we can teach you. So I just want you to get a basic understanding, and this is the slide I want you to pay most attention to, of what the differences are between the 2 pathways. So the autonomic nervous system is going to divide into 2 pathways, the sympathetic pathway and the parasympathetic pathway. And each of those have opposite actions. And if you remember from the very first day I started talking about the nervous system, I said that we normally reside somewhere in the middle of these 2 pathways. So the sympathetic system dominates in an emergency or stressful situation. And this is our fight or flight. This is like a big bear shows up at your front door. And what is happening is, and I'll show you on the next slide, that there are nerves. There's a set of nerves for the sympathetic pathway and a set of nerves that are for the parasympathetic pathway. And they innervate the same organ. And so they're going to modulate your response based on whether you're in a fight or flight. Because if you're in a fight or flight situation, you want to run. So a lot of physiological things need to happen to get you ready to do that. On the contrary, in contrast, the parasympathetic system dominates in a quiet, relaxed situation. And this is called rest and digest. And so when we are resting, things in our body change. Our heart rate changes, our pupils, they're not going to be constricted anymore, our airways, all of those things, all of those internal organs, again, are going to be innervated. So if you can pick anything, like the lungs, there's going to be an innervation by the sympathetic system and an innervation by the parasympathetic system to tell the body what to do. So here it is here. Most organs are innervated by both of the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways or fibers. So that would be axons. And they are going to produce opposite effects. So this dual intervention allows our bodies to have precise control over what we need to do. So I think this kind of sums it up. So here is the sympathetic, the fight or flight. So again, here are, your pupils. So in fight or flight, they're going to be dilated because we're going to run and we want to see as much of our surroundings as possible. We don't need to digest anything because we're getting ready to run. So we don't need to salivate. Our heart rate is going to go up. Our airways are going to be relaxed so that we can get more air as we're running. We don't need to digest anything. You get the idea. On the opposite side, if we are just relaxing at night, we turned on Netflix and we already took our anatomy exam, so we're totally relaxed. Our pupils can constrict a little bit. We can digest food. Our heart rate is nice and slow. We don't need a lot of air in the airways, and so forth. So there are nerves that are innervating these organs, and they have opposite effects. And again, usually we're somewhere in between, right? We're usually not faced with a bear, and we're normally not just chilling out watching Netflix. We're kind of somewhere in the middle. So that is all that I need you to know about the sympathetic nervous system, and that is going to conclude this lecture. Our final lecture on the nervous system is going to take on the anatomy of the brain and some of the more complex functions that are going on in the brain.